When people think about fatigue, most think about iron deficiency as the main culprit. Your practitioner might run a blood test, see low iron markers, and the first recommendation will be take an iron supplement. But that's not what most people should do, and it's not the underlying reason for their fatigue. Often the problem isn't too little iron, but actually too much. That's because iron overload can be one of the biggest underlying drivers of chronic fatigue. Let's unpack how this works step by step. Okay, so we all know that iron is essential for life. It's the mineral that helps hemoglobin in your red blood cells carry oxygen from your lungs to every part of your body. So without iron, your energy would crash because your cells simply wouldn't be able to get the oxygen that they need to make ATP. It's also important for your immune system and even your brain. So yes, iron is definitely crucial, but it's also a double-edged sword. The same chemical properties that make it great at binding oxygen also make it dangerous when there's too much. Excess iron promotes oxidative stress, so basically like rust forming inside your tissues. That rusting effect damages cells, inflames tissue, and disrupts energy production. Now, the most interesting part, and what many people don't realize, is that even though your body needs about 25 milligrams of iron every day, almost all of that comes from the recycling of old red blood cells. Your spleen and your liver break them down after about 120 days and then reuse the iron to build new ones. Only about 1 milligram per day actually needs to come from food. This is a well-established medical fact that is often missed in the iron anemia or iron chronic fatigue debate. The problem is that nowadays, many of us are surrounded by iron-fortified foods, multivitamins loaded with extra iron, and sometimes also a lot of dietary iron. Over time, this can create a buildup that your body simply has no good way to get rid of. Now, why doesn't this show up right away in blood tests? Technically, about 60% of your total body's iron is found in the blood, but all of that excess iron gets deposited in tissues, especially the liver, heart, pancreas, and even the brain. And very few people do tissue tests instead of blood tests. It's usually only done for people who are at risk of hemochromatosis, which is genetic iron overload and not the topic of this video. In non-hemochromatosis iron overload, you can sometimes even have the situation where your blood tests show low iron while still being overloaded in your organs. Think of it like having money stuck in a savings account that you can't access. Your blood might look empty, but your tissues are full, and that trapped iron is doing a lot of damage. Now, what you have to understand is that iron overload disrupts energy in several ways. So one, and we said this before, it creates oxidative stress also in the mitochondria. The mitochondria are your cell's power plants, and iron buildup causes them to pump out harmful free radicals instead of ATP. Less ATP means less energy and more fatigue. You will also run into persistent inflammation. That's because excess iron irritates tissues, and when your immune system is always on trying to fight that inflammation, it drains energy that should go towards your daily life. Unfortunately, the buildup will also disrupt your recycling system. So iron needs to be moved around by proteins like ceruloplasmin. And because ceruloplasmin is made in your liver, if liver health is poor, iron often becomes biounavailable. So the same problem we talked about before, where you don't have enough iron in the blood, even though there's plenty sitting in your tissues. The result will be that your blood markers are low, but your cells are still suffocating. And lastly, we have hormonal and brain effects. That's because iron overload can also damage your thyroid and pituitary gland. This will then mess with your metabolism. And in the brain, excess iron promotes oxidative damage linked to conditions like Alzheimer's. So what I'm trying to say is that too much iron slows you down in every way, even though the whole point of iron is to give you energy. This applies especially to men who don't have a monthly iron release valve like women do. They simply don't lose as much blood as women and therefore store it faster. If you then add in iron-fortified foods and supplements, many men accumulate iron without realizing it, and by middle age, fatigue, joint pain, and liver problems can creep in, often being misdiagnosed as unrelated issues. Now, what can you do about this? If you're dealing with chronic fatigue and suspect that iron could be part of the problem, here are some things that you definitely need to consider. First, you want to get the right tests. So ferritin and transferrin saturation are good starting points and definitely better than just serum iron. But remember, even these can be tricky to interpret and you do have cases where even low levels are connected with iron overload. You definitely also want to check copper and ceruloplasmin. That's because iron is made bioavailable by them, and low levels of ceruloplasmin are definitely problematic. Also, iron overload often goes hand in hand with copper overload or some type of copper imbalance, so definitely be sure to look into that as well. One thing you always want to be careful with are iron supplements, again, especially if you're a man, because here iron excess is a lot more common than an outright deficiency. And lastly, you always want to support liver health. Your liver plays a key role in recycling iron. So a sluggish liver means sluggish iron metabolism. Now, liver health is vital for overall health, so everyone should already work on it, but especially people that are at risk of iron overload. If you need a more detailed explanation on diagnosis and correcting this iron overload, make sure to check out my chronic fatigue recovery program that will be linked in the description. It goes over the exact lab values to look out for, as well as a step-by-step program on lowering iron gradually from your tissue and bringing it back into circulation. Probably the most important thing you have to understand is that chronic fatigue isn't always just lacking nutrients. It's often about being imbalanced and having too much of them in the wrong places. Iron overload is one of those hidden causes that can make you feel constantly drained even while your blood work looks fine. So by understanding how iron really works, so how it's recycled, how it builds up, and how your other nutrients tie into it, you can start to see why adding more of it isn't always the solution, and instead you want to bring everything back into balance.